I'm Therese. I run a business called Small Business Collaborative, and I have a background in sales. I've sold anything from high, like luxury home fragrance, like candles and stuff, to novelties like lip balms shaped like a cupcake. Very random things. I spend a lot of time in publishing. I've sold a lot into various fashion stores, like products like gift products that would sit alongside their offering. For example, I sold into the big high street stores and a lot of wonderful smaller independents, which I love dealing with. And for the last almost coming up to 3 years now, I've been helping small business owners start and grow their wholesale. So whether that is to start talking about what we're going to talk about today, like what retail buyers expect and how to price your products and that sort of thing, all the way through to more like sales focused selling and strategy and actually scaling your business and hiring your first salesperson and all that. So I really love doing that. I get to work with so many creative businesses now. It's so much fun. And let's get going. Right, so briefly what we're going to cover, and I'm going to try to do this quickly so we get through it all, but we're going to talk about what wholesale is and the different terms and ways to sell into shops, how to know if wholesale is right for your business and if you're ready, prices and margins. So we're going to do a bit of an introduction to what retailers expect and from you, and what the benefits are with wholesale after giving up all that margin. Terms and conditions, this is really something that is quite important to make you come across experience, the buyers can trust you. We're going to talk through a bit about your catalog or line sheet and what the difference is, how to sell to shops and how much time you need to do that, and how to find retailers to sell to. So the first thing is what wholesale is. And I always start here because sometimes different terms are thrown around and it can get quite muddled. So really, I mean, in a nutshell, wholesale means to sell in bulk at a lower price to another business, and usually that business will be reselling your products. It can be a really great way to create an additional revenue stream for your business, get more eyes on your brand and grow your brand and brand awareness. And there's lots of different ways now to wholesale. You get to take advantage of that your stockists can already of their customer base that already know, like, and trust them, which can obviously help grow your brand. So different terms that you might come across is firm sale or seller return. Firm sale is generally what people refer to when we talk about wholesale, but seller return is the type of wholesale. So I think it's really important to differentiate, between the two. Firm sale essentially means that when a retailer placed an order with you and you sent them the stock and you invoice them, whether they have to pay you up front or pay a deposit or whatever their payment terms are, once you send them the stuff, they can't return it unless something is faulty, for example. Whereas seller return would mean that once you send them the stock, they could potentially return what they don't sell. And there can be lots of different rules around that, but generally speaking, they should only be able to return what is in the resellable condition. But I do think it's particularly if you have something that people pick up a lot or things that go out of season, seller return is not always the best way to trade with shops. Of course, it's a little bit different if it's a pop-up store or something like that. Then it can, of course, be quite beneficial for you because they often do a lot of PR and, they have a loyal following and stuff. But for a shop that is open all year round, it's not necessarily always the best way. Then we have commission, which means that it's usually at a lower percentage that the retailer gets to keep. It essentially means that you supply the stock, and when they sell something, they pay you minus their commission. A lot of pop-up shops work that way. A lot of smaller brands start selling to retailers that way because they might not be able to afford a full wholesale margin sometimes. Commissions can vary widely. With art, it's usually 50%, but like for most product categories, I would say 25 to 30% is probably about right. And then you have drop shipping, which essentially is usually an online retailer that takes your products. They list your products on their website, and when they make a sale, they tell you about it and you send it to their customer, but you invoice the retailer minus their commission, essentially. So that is often also 25 to 30%. So those are three common models for wholesale. So I think after that, it's really important to make sure that wholesale is right for your business, because it's not, I think in the small business kind of environment, it's really easy to be pulled into something just because you think you have to do it. But I think it's really important because it is another revenue stream. It needs your attention. It needs effort to grow and get started. So it's really important that you are happy to put in that time. So we're going to just quickly check that it's in line with your business goals. Your products are ready, and I'm going to cover a few myths around wholesale. So I think that wholesale is a great thing for you if you want to grow your sales and brand awareness. It's something that you've had part of your long-term strategy and goals. And if you can set aside time each week to actively work on your sales and your wholesale, often I ask brands, like, how much of your total revenue do you want to come from wholesale? And I often hear things like 50%, but they don't want to allocate time each week to it. You need to allocate time each week to grow and create something. So, I don't want to mislead you in any way. It will take a little bit of time, especially in the beginning. Of course, you need to have a product to sell. So if you are early on in your business journey, take it all in and know what you need to do. But then you will get started once you have products to get selling with. It's important that they meet all the legal requirements. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And that you can make enough products as a consistent quality is really important. It might not be quite right for you right now if you are already getting more sales than you can handle. You decided that it's not what you want for your business. Perhaps after we cover what margins are expected and stuff. If you're really time poor, I wouldn't start it right now. Your products are not ready yet. I think it's really good to get clear on and price for wholesale right away when you start, or as early on as you can, because it means that you don't have to go through that whole process later on. And if you can't make any more stock, of course, wholesale might not be right for you. So your products, if your products are ready, you need to consider how they will be displayed in store. This is a really big one, I think, for retailers. If they can't naturally see or instantly see how to display your products, of course, if it's a dress or garment, that's pretty easy. But if you make accessories, for example, you need to consider how it's packaged, especially things that doesn't, part of why you want to be displayed in or sold in shops is so that you get to grow your audience. So with maybe jewelry, for example, it's really hard to put your brand on there. So it's most likely going to be on the packaging. So thinking about how things will be displayed is really, really important. And I think it's something that often brands think about later on, whereas I think that is really good to think about it right from the start, so you can include any costs that are involved in that in your pricing, in your costs, And also it will really help you build trust with buyers because you're contacting them with a retail ready product. So of course, then talking about that retail packaging, if your products need packaging, I mean, even when I say packaging, even a swing ticket would be part of your packaging. So, you know, that it's on brand and people would touch things. You don't want it to get manky, like a matte black label looks great the first time someone picks it up. Doesn't look great after there's like 10 people that has touched it with greasy hands. So considering how your retail packaging looks, because that's going to protect your brand as well, I think is really important. Legal requirements, I think you need to make sure that it meets all the legal requirements. Depending on what your product is, that will be different. So if you're a bit unsure if there is anything that you need to consider, then do have a think about that, and you know, get some advice from trading standards or something like that. There's a few myths I feel like that kind of cause inaction or make people hold back when it comes to wholesale. I think people think that you have to have a huge range of products from day one. You don't have to. You just have to adjust who you target as a stockist. There's some things that you have to be in business a very long time. You absolutely don't have to. I know plenty of businesses that has launched to shops before they even, you know, had an established business. You don't need to have everything perfect. You know, our businesses is a journey. They evolve and change, and so perfection and going after perfection can really hold you back sometimes. Don't think that you won't cope with the demand of volumes. I'm sure that if, you know, you had one of these crazy things where your brand blows up overnight, you will cope with it. You will deal with it. And, you know, wholesale, even though we are giving up that margin for larger orders, we don't have to talk thousands. We can talk, you know, a much smaller volume as well. So it really very much depends on the type of retailer you go after, what your product is, what your price points are. So it doesn't have to be, you know, just because we say higher volumes, it doesn't have to be thousands. And I also hear in like Facebook groups and stuff, people saying, oh, but retailers make so much more than me. Is it even worth it? And they don't, you know, the price you give them has to cover all of their staffing, shop fittings, marketing, and all of that other stuff. So I think of it more as a collaborative effort to work together than that they would make more than you. So retail prices. Of course, we can cover this in a lot more detail, but we could literally spend the whole session on prices, or probably several. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of pricing. I think that the first thing to say is when you think about when you start to wholesale, or when you're thinking about starting to wholesale, it's really important to do a complete pricing review, I think, to make sure that you will still make money. Is really important. It's very easy to get very excited and carried away, especially if you get a yes from a big retailer that is your dream retailer. But if you're not making money, it's going to get boring quite quickly. So doing a pricing review is really, really important. What I mean with that is just getting clear on your numbers, knowing what each product costs you, how much money you make on wholesale, on retail, so that you can ensure that you make money. In terms of terms, like I will be talking about RRP, or recommended retail price. That is what things are selling for in shops or on your website. It's your recommended price for retailers to retail your products at. Now, if you wholesale something to someone, you can recommend what they will sell it on, you cannot tell them they have to sell at that price, because that will be price fixing and it's not legal. Of course, if it's commission based or something like that, or they take a percentage of the sale, you both have to agree on the price, so it's a bit different. But if you wholesale something to someone, you can't say to them you have to sell it at this price. But and that's why it's called recommended retail price. So the way I teach pricing is that I teach pricing based on value of your products, not any set formula. The reason why I do that is that it's all about who your customer is and what your brand is. It's not necessarily what it costs you to make. Of course, that has to marry up to make sure that you make money. But, some of the biggest brands in the world, they're not pricing, say cost price times 2 is the wholesale price and times it 2 again, and you get the retail price. They price it on what customers are willing to pay. So like taking my iPhone, for example, I'm guessing if it was just based on cost price alone and not on the brand, that would be a lot cheaper than it is. So I like to really start at the point where you get to know your customers, you get to know your competitors, and you don't have to be the cheapest, but you need to know where you sit in the marketplace to ensure that you can. And that's where I tend to start the whole kind of pricing review thing. There's a customer for every price point. So, what's expensive to someone will be cheap to someone else and vice versa. And when you do start to wholesale and when you go through this pricing review, you may have to put your retail prices up, which is also why you want to start with doing some market research about your competitors and where you sit in the marketplace to know if your products can take that. Everyone that I work with, like often when I work with clients, like especially one-to-one, I say 90% of the time, if we end up putting the prices up, like their products can take it. And actually in some instances, they end up selling more because the price is right and their customer trusts them more. So sometimes if you say you're a sustainable brand, you're a small business, you hand make everything, or whatever your story is, if it's too cheap, no one's gonna trust that that's the case. So you have to start with your customer and what you want them to feel and think about when they see your products. So I would say that the most common, so pricing and margins can really vary quite a lot. I would say anything from a markup of 2 times 2, so the retail price times 2. The wholesale price times 2, sorry, to 2.45 or 2.7 even with fashion-based items is quite common. I would say that the average really is a markup of 2.4, and I'm going to break that down a little bit. 2.4, so that's like the wholesale price times 2.4 gives the retail price. That is the same as 50% discount on the ex VAT recommended retail price. And that is a mouthful. But basically, even if you're not VAT registered, you do need to consider VAT, because the retailers you are going to be selling to, I mean, in most cases, they are going to be VAT registered. And if you didn't consider it, their margin will be eaten up by them having to pay HMRC, basically. So what does that mean? So to get the ex-VAT price, first of all, you take your recommended retail price and you divide it by 1.2. So I just have an example on here, which is a candle that retails at £25. The ex-VAT price on that will be £20.83. I got that by taking 25, divided it by 1.2. Then if you divide that by 2, you get the becomes 50% discount on the ex-VAT price, and it ends up being £10.42. You could quite easily do that same calculation by just taking the 25 and divide it by 2.4. It would absolutely give you the same number. Sometimes that is called markup, wholesale factor. Whereas when we talk about discount, we generally talk discount off the recommended retail price or the ex-VAT recommended retail price. Alternatively, if you wanted to, or sometimes people talk about 60%, and confusingly, when we talk about 60% and when buyers talk about 60%, they often mean of the recommended retail price, not the ex-VAT recommended retail price, which equals a markup of 2.5. So one way to get that is on the screen. It's 25 times 0.6, so 60% equals 15. Then you take your 25 minus 15, it leaves you 10. Or you could take 25 and divide it by 2.5 and you get £10, which would then be the wholesale price on this item in this example. This can be quite confusing, so if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll cover them, because I think it's really important to understand why you need to consider VAT and stuff. It can be very confusing. So now when you know that you need to give up all that margin basically, and you might think, oh, that's not a lot left for me, what is the benefits with wholesaling in general? And so volume is definitely one of the benefits. Not only will it bring you more sales, it means that the sale happens earlier. Is you sell to one person, it is their responsibility to sell to many. Also, higher volumes means that you can hopefully get better prices on the supplies that you buy. So if you're having, fabric or even bespoke fabrics done, generally prices go down quite a lot the higher, the yardage is, for example. So definitely a plus to be able to negotiate better prices, or maybe even access different suppliers. At the beginning of your business journey, you might have to go with a more expensive fabric wholesaler, for example. You might not even be able to do your own patterns on there if you're a textile designer, but as you grow, it might open up more possibilities for you. So it could actually help you to really create what you want to create sometimes, which is exciting. Packaging is one of those things that is really, really expensive in low quantities. So it can really help you sometimes once your volumes go up. Of course, repeat orders is like the real key thing, because if you have a stockist, they're not going to go through all that research and finding you and figuring out what your terms are and all that stuff just to order once from you. They're likely to order a few times at least. So repeat orders come easier from you. If you're a good supplier, you keep innovating, you keep putting good products out, hopefully they will keep you on their books for a while. Brand exposure, more eyes on your brand, like I talked about earlier. And shops are open all year round pretty much, so selling doesn't stop. If you go on holiday, someone else will be selling your products. You can definitely work with your retailers and say, I'm taking August off, get your orders in by this date, and then you can go on holiday, shut your web shop, and someone else can deal with it and continue to sell your products. Terms and conditions. I'm at that point where I feel like I'm starting to talk really fast, but terms and conditions are very, very important, and it can be a little bit different depending on what kind of products you do. But basically, when I talk about terms and conditions, because I'm not a solicitor, I talk about things that buyers want to know to be able to buy from you. I'm not talking about your full legal terms and conditions. But basically the highlights of it. So minimum order, basically how much money they have to spend with you each time they place an order. Carriage paid is the same thing as free shipping. So whether that is that they have to spend, depending on your product price, you know, £200 or £300 or £1,000 for you to cover the shipping. Generally, we do that within the mainland UK, if you're UK based, because the islands gets very expensive. So I would always asterisk that with mainland UK. Carriage pay can be a really good way to upsell. So I really like to have that in there, because buyers 90% of the time will try to spend over your carriage pay demand, so they don't have to pay 10 or 15 pounds for carriage, which obviously is still going to be in your cost price. So you will be covered anyway. Pro forma. So when you start off, you can trade on lots of different types of payment terms. Pro forma, which means payment upfront, is probably the one that is going to be the most beneficial for you when you start out, which means that they have to pay before you send the stuff. If you are made to order, I would even make it pay before you make it. If it's a very long lead time, then maybe 50% deposit, for example, and then 50% before you deliver could be an option. Whereas if you have a short turnaround, just get them to pay up front. Pack size is how many they have to take of one SKU, so one product, each time they order. Now for fashion, that might be a pack size might include, you know, a range of sizes. For a more accessories based product or a gift based product, it might be, you know, a pack size might be 2 or 3 or 6. It's or even 1 if it's a very bulky things, like a bed would probably come in 1, whereas like a candle would probably come in a pack size of 6. If it was more like not very expensive jewelry, for example, it might come in 6s, whereas if it was really pricey and one-off pieces, it would obviously come in 1s. It's also really important that when you put your terms and conditions on your line sheet or in your catalog, that you inform your buyer what the lead times are. That is really, really key. They need to know that to buy from you. And it's better to be upfront about these things. So then what is sales material do you need? So the most important one to have is to have a catalog or a line sheet. If you have a catalog, you don't need a line sheet as well, as long as you put all your products in there. Now in fashion, it's quite common to have a lookbook. If you have a lookbook where you just put this season in, not necessarily everything that you carry in all the different colorways, then you do need a line sheet. But if you put everything in your catalog, then you don't. A catalog is like, I see it like the magazine of your brand. It's like everything that encompasses in your brand. So if you're handmade, made to order, has sustainable values, a little bit about you as a brand owner or designer, it lets you really communicate what you are all about. So that is pretty much the difference. A line sheet is like a simplified, just the details of your products. There is a difference between a line sheet for wholesale and a line sheet for your PR. PR line sheets are even more simplified than the wholesale line sheet. When it comes to designing your catalog or line sheet, or if you want to do a lookbook line sheet combination, just remember that done is better than perfect. This is not going out to your end consumer. This is going out to a retail buyer. To be able to contact them, you need something to present them with. So, you know, don't feel that it has to be something you spend all your time on. I know people that spend well over half a year on their catalog, and by that time they added so many new products they have to start all over again, and it's a vicious cycle because they want it to be perfect. So definitely restrict yourself if you are a creative. and what to include. So if it was a catalog, for example, and I do have some blogs about this on my website. In a catalog, you definitely want to tell people about you and your brand. You want to have product pages where it is an image of the product, and you want to tell them everything. The sizes is available in, the material it's made in, the wholesale price, the recommended retail price, the SKU, which is like a product reference number. It's something that you make up and assign for each product. If you have barcodes, you would put that in there. If you don't have, if it's not, you know, a clothing item, you might put burn time 40 hours. Or if it was like these earring hoops, you might put, you know, the dimensions of them so people can see that they're quite small versus, you know, maybe bigger hoops. If you make products like earrings and stuff, you have to say how they're going to be packaged, for example. So you basically want to include everything a buyer might want to know to buy from you in a very organized and easy to digest way in your catalog. And then you want to, on the last page, the second to last page, I would definitely put in your terms and conditions and how to order and your contact details. So how to sell to shops and how much time you need to sell to shops. So the most common way to reach out to retail buyers is by email. It's by far the most common way now, especially if you're not doing trade shows. But even if you were doing trade shows, you would still be emailing. My number one tip for emailing potential stockers is to keep it personal and let your passion and product knowledge shine through. I think that's super, super important. We're going to go through that in a little bit more detail. The most important is to be consistent. So wholesale does not happen overnight very often. Sometimes you might have retailers seeking you out, but it doesn't happen like that all the time. So it's really important that you dedicate some time each week to do outreach and contact buyers whose shop you want to be in. Set yourself up for success. If you're only going to have 30 minutes one day a week, then make sure you spend that 30 minutes well. Or, you know, if you want to grow a bit quicker, you're going to have to dedicate a bit more time. But following up is really important. Most people give up after 1 to 3 emails, but you, just as with marketing, you need several touch points. So your chances goes up quite a lot after they've come across your brands at least 6 times or 6 emails, basically. That slide has disappeared. Okay, so let's talk about what to include in your email pitch quickly, because I don't know where that slide has gone. So first of all, keep the subject line really simple. A lot of retail buyers, just like PR people or editors, they use their inbox a little bit like a search function or their own bespoke Google, if you will. So tell them in the subject line what it is you sell. If they are likely to know what your brand is, included in the subject line. Otherwise, focus on what products you have. And don't try to be overly clever, because then it's just going to look like a newsletter. Address the person, try to research who they are so you can address them by first name. Ask lots of questions. You know, we want them to feel the need to get back to you. Make them visual by embedding images inside your email. Do a very brief paragraph like about who you are, what the brand is, and why you think it's a good fit for the retail buyer. Even putting that, like why, you know, how you guys are aligned and how you basically them having you in their shop is going to make them, you know, convert to good sales. Even if you want to bullet point that just to make it very clear, perhaps. And then make sure that you send the catalog or the line sheet in that first email. There's no point of asking a buyer, can I send you a line sheet, or can I send you my catalog, then they're most likely 99% of the time they're not going to have time to get back to you and say, yes, please send me your catalog. So make sure it's linked in that email. I say linked because I prefer it that way, because if you link your catalog in, I mean, spam filters are very clever now, so sometimes even links go into junk, but definitely a heavy PDF file will probably result in it going into junk mail. So try to link to it. You can upload it to Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox and link to it. Just don't use like a Wien transfer file where they have to download it before they are we time.
Yes, sorry, I'm just gonna pop in here. It's 1:45 now, so maybe if you're okay to kind of wrap up on the slide, that would be amazing.
Yes.
Are you near the end? Unless if you're near, feel free to
one more slide.
Keep going. Yes, you're wonderful, amazing. Okay, good timing. Right, carry on.
Yeah, so allocate time and make sure that in that email that you attach, or make sure your catalog is included. And WeTransfer links are not great because they're not going to want to download something from someone that they don't know. So definitely something where they can preview it without downloading. And then the last slide is all about finding retailers. And this is very much like, just quickly, go local, visit your local towns. I always say start with independent retailers if you can, only because the bigger they are, the more rules they have. So and the harder it is to find the right person. Whereas in a small boutique, it's usually the shop owner that does the buying. So local favorite shops of your audience, if you have a strong audience on Instagram, for example, follow regular like relevant hashtags. My shop is very much for gift shops, I believe. But if you're a product and, you know, more of a gift product base, then My Shop Life could be a good one. I'm sure there's plenty of good ones for fashion boutiques as well. But, you know, even asking your audience is a good way. Look at your competitors, brands that you can be stocked. Imagine your products being stocked alongside, not someone you're planning to replace, but someone that could complement you, and see where they are being stocked and potentially contact the retailers that they are being stocked in. And this slide is really not that important. It's this is just me, like on my social media, if you want to see where you can find me. It's small_business_collaborative. And my website is just smallbusinesscollaborative.co.uk. So
amazing. Cool. Thank you
so
much, Therese. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I'm so close to time. Well done. So close to the time. So that's amazing.
I did speed up after a while, I think.
You did great. That was really great. That was super, super informative. Thank you. And I hope everyone listening, I hope you all got a lot out of that. It was definitely a crash course in wholesale, which is amazing. So let's jump on to questions. Great, Gaith, putting the video on. Everyone else on, do feel free to put your videos on. Now's the time to get really intimate. Let's get some questions out there. Does anyone, there's one question I think came in that I'm just going to quickly ask. I think it's quite interesting, and I know a couple of people are probably interested. Some of them we've covered, but one in particular, so Selfridges. I know we talked about markups, but it's interesting. I think the Selfridges one is interesting because it's probably a little bit different to the usual that you mentioned. What are your thoughts around Selfridges markups, or maybe how does that also align with Harvey Nichols or Liberty or some of these bigger retailers?
So, I mean, most bigger retailers do ask for higher margins than maybe independent retailers does. But not only do they ask for higher margins, they also cost a lot more to deliver into. So they might make exceptions if they really want your brand, because, you know, if you are the brand to stock, someone like Selfridges might work with you in certain instances just because they really want your brand. But in general rule of thumb, I guess, or general trends is that the bigger the retailer, the more money they're going to want out of you, or more margin. And they do cost money to deliver into, so they have a very specific kind of supplier manual of how you have to deliver into them. So that might be that you have to use their labels. Maybe sometimes you have to buy those labels. You have to deliver between certain times. The pack sizes need to be in a certain way. You can only use, if you have garments that are folded, you have to have like air holes in the poly bag. You have to have a warning, choking warning on the poly bags, things that perhaps you
Really
wouldn't have to do for a smaller retailer. And all those things cost you money, which is why I mentioned them. And they also might want payment terms. So they might want to pay you in 30 days, for example. And sometimes some of them also take a discount when they pay you on time.
Yeah, I think Vivian asked the question, and she's also popped in here. She's heard that in some instances, bigger retailers have done a 4 markup. Is that in line with what you've seen? Yeah. I mean, I remember working at Harvey Nichols years ago, and it was 3.3 at least. It's high.
But then it is high, but I also know that some smaller brands that are in Selfridges have gotten away with, quite low margins because they really want to.
Okay, interesting.
It's not always, I mean, with fashion it can go really, really high, which is really, really hard. But if you hand make everything in a small scale production, that's not going to always be possible, which is why I think a good starting point is the 2.4 2.5 mark sort of thing. And then at least it means that they can look at you and consider you and say, no, actually we need this, and you will have to decide if you can do it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Okay, I'm going to move us along to another question. So Gaith, you've got quite a few questions in here. Do you want to take the floor? Because you've got your video on. Do you choose one or two of your questions, and let's jump in with those? It's probably better straight from you.
I'm trying to remember what my first question was. Where is it?
So you've asked about swing tags, whether or not they should be customized and ready or left up to the shops to do.
Yes.
So
I think swing tags should be like in line with your brand. There needs to be space kind of somewhere on there for them to put a sticker if they need to price sticker it, for example. So it's good if it's not like filled both back and front. And it also means that if you did sell one like Selfridges where they send you the labels and you have to attach them to your swing tickets, you have space for it. So it's definitely worth considering from the beginning, but I would make them in according to your brand.
Okay. And yeah, I think the other question was about minimum quantities or minimum order. Like for me, I have I print my scarves, and for wholesaling to be viable, I have to print at least 10 meters of fabric. So that translates to 9 scarves of a certain size. Or 10 scarves of a certain size. Can I say that as a minimum order, or the minimum order has to be like in pounds?
Generally speaking, we have your pack sizes. So your pack size could be 10, for example. It depends on your price point a little bit. If you have a quite premium price point, to get a small boutique to order 10 of the same design is quite a lot. It probably is better that you try to get in, to several small boutiques then, and say the pack size is 3, for example, but they have to spend X amount each time they order from you. So it's very it's not a straight answer to your question, basically. Okay. But yeah, we could talk more about that. I think there's a lot more to that.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we've got quite a few questions also from Vivian, which is amazing to see. I think there's one just going back to markups that's quite interesting and worth mentioning. So I think Vivian maybe is having some challenges around how to produce pricing, not wanting to scare buyers, not wanting to put them off, but what to put out there in the first instance without having tested the water. Would you recommend for a brand to maybe produce like final RRPs based on costing and customer perceptive and the value, and then kind of working back and being able to be flexible with that margin depending on the retailer? Well, how would you do it if you're brand new to this, you're just trying to get out there, but you're a bit worried that someone might come back and be like, that's too much, or
I think, you know, remembering that you do not have to be the cheapest is like really, really important. You need to set, you're educating, you're building your customer base. So you really need to build the customer that you know, and target the customer that you want to achieve. So don't try to be cheaper in the beginning, for example. Like, you know, your retail prices should be in line with where you think they should be. And I know that's a guessing game in the beginning, which is really difficult, but needs to be in line with your brand. I would say that you need to put something down as a wholesale price, because they need to have an idea. If you keep changing it depending on who you're pitching to, that's quite difficult. You know, if you put ×2 or 2.4, for example, that's your starting point. And then if like Liberties want your stuff, then they will have to negotiate with you. But I would not recommend starting under a markup of 2, because it's just not going to work for hardly anyone. But you know, and already at 2, you know, you are probably restricting yourself quite a bit. Unless you're in magazine publishing, because they have very low margins.
Is it easier for a brand to put their prices up over the years or reduce them, would you say?
I would say reduce them. But to be honest, both ways is fine. Like I often, when I work one-to-one with clients, I would say probably 70% of the time we end up putting their prices up. Because they just need someone to allow, like convince them that their products are worth it, and it's based on market research and where they should be in the marketplace, not on, you know, I get, you know, I don't feel like I'm worth this much money. Like they, you know, sometimes you just need someone to tell you you're worth it.
Yeah, I get that. I think you're right. Okay, amazing. Vivian, there's quite a few other questions from you in here. If you want to jump on and ask any, feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to move to the VAT question, which I do think is quite important and interesting to talk about. How does a brand that's not VAT registered deal with VAT when it comes to an order placed?
So wholesale, you're quoting ex VAT. You know, if you're not VAT registered, your terms wouldn't have ex VAT, for example. They would just say, so say going back, if that was the candle, like in the example, for example, the wholesale price would be £10.42. The retail price is £25, or recommended retail price, and you will put a disclaimer saying, please note, I'm not VAT registered. But it will be evident to buyers that you have considered that they are, because there is enough margin for them there to pay HMRC and then still make their margin. So if you're not registered, you just have to tell them that you're not registered. But I would always, if you can, consider it when you set your recommended retail prices, because essentially they will be including VAT, not for you when you sell your products directly, but for the retailer, that's what they would sell them at, including VAT. This is for the UK and Europe. If you're selling in the US, they have a different tax system, so it's a bit different. I don't know if anyone tends to sell abroad that is likely to be here.
Okay, great. No, that's super interesting. Okay, well, we're coming up to 5. Does anyone have any kind of final questions? Or Vivian, if there are any others that we haven't covered? I think most are covered, but if any aren't, do you want to jump in and just, and we can have a chat about them? Or does anyone else want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, I think there was a question from Vivian about down payments. Like, is it okay to ask buyers for down payments, or is that a bit unprofessional?
So it's quite common in fashion to ask for a deposit. If you do candles or something like that, which is a very competitive field, it's not as common. But with fashion items, it's quite common to ask for, like, say 50% upfront and 50% before delivery. So it does not make you unprofessional to ask for it. And, you know, it could be part of the negotiations too.
Yeah, just on that, I would say at least ask for 30% upfront. I would never ever produce or recommend anyone produces without getting that. for your own safety. Cool. And I think there's just one more question from Vivian. I apologize if there's some background noise. There is something going on in the next unit. So if you can hear a funny noise, that's me, and I apologize. I'm in our office on South Moulton Street, and there's some building work going on next door. Anyway, so Vivian's popped in. So traditionally, how far ahead do buyers want to buy products? Do they stick to the main selling season, or are they buying throughout the year? This is probably quite an interesting one, especially after the pandemic, and now that we seem to be moving more seasonless. So yeah, I look forward to hearing your thoughts, Therese.
It's vastly different depending on the retailer, first of all, and also if you're if you're a brand that is seasonless, it's also very different. If you do pre-orders, of course, that also impacts it. I would say the kind of big buyers often work between half a year to a year in advance as an average, sometimes more. It really, really, really depends. If you are a brand that keeps stock of your products throughout the season, they obviously, if they can, they would rather, a lot of them, especially after the pandemic, would rather order little and often than ordering a year in advance. But definitely with fashion, I think a year is pretty normal. But if you have products today to sell to them for right now, they might also consider that. The bigger retailers perhaps not would have signed off Christmas by now, in most instances, unless they're looking for that one thing that they needed to slot in, or sometimes they have had higher footfall and they get a bit of budget, or someone let them down. So don't, I would say always ask them what season they're working on.
Great. Okay, well, that's taken us to 5. Are there any final questions before we let Therese go? It's been a very informative and interesting session. Thank you so much, Therese.
Oh,
Final
thank you.
questions? No? Oh, one more question from Vivian. Vivian, you're full of questions. I'm loving it. Any ideas how to tackle packaging when you want to be as sustainable as possible, making accessories? So obviously there's a lot of alternatives out there. I'm sure you have a breadth of knowledge across this, Therese. What do we do about packaging?
I mean, I think that retailers are also not into like this big packaging, over packaged products. I mean, some are, obviously the supermarkets are horrendous, but like in general, like shops and boutiques and stuff, they don't want to have loads of packaging. So I think you have to decide what's okay with your brand. If I don't know, what do you make? Fabric do you know what Vivian makes, if it's fabric accessories or like other types of accessories? Because if it's fabric or something that can get damaged in a leather, so they might, if you dealt with a big retailer, they're likely to want you to put it in plastic, which is really like basically a poly bag to deliver in, because their warehouses are really dirty places, and a lot of people will, to make sure that it stays pristine by the time it gets to the shops, they almost need them to be in plastic. But certainly for some smaller boutiques and stuff, if you had a dust bag or whatever, it might be good enough. I think you really have to think about what you're happy with in terms of that. It depends on the size of them as well too. But when it comes to big retailers, it's really, really hard to tell them, because of their warehouse procedures, that you pretty much have to do what they say. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that is a tricky one, but definitely good to be thinking about this now.
Yes.
Super exciting. Cool. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap us up there. We've been great at keeping to time. Thank you so much, Therese, for a very insightful presentation. We've had some amazing questions. Thank you, especially Gaith and Vivian. You have asked a breadth of questions, which have been fantastic. And thank you everyone for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you next time on another webinar. If not, or even if we do, which would be great, do follow Therese, check out the Small Business Collaborative Instagram, sign up to her newsletters. She is a wealth of information and runs so many courses herself that will help you guys. So I hope you will connect and hopefully take the conversation further. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.